and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. In this podcast, we rewatch a Hitchcock movie and then we talk about it. I'm Dan Lipke and I'm changing my plans on the fly.
And I'm Kat Jones and I'm reaching frantically for my scissors because this time around we are rewatching the 7th best Hitchcock movie as voted on by our listeners, and that's Dial M for Murder, 1954.
Yes, so what else happened in 1954?
The first ever organ transplant operation was completed. It was a kidney from one twin to another identical twin.
Solar batteries were also first kind of put into practical form.
I presume this was the size of a small car?
I'm not exactly sure. The research I read said that it powered a 21-inch Ferris wheel. So when they say in practical form, I'm not sure exactly how practical that is. But anyway, they were getting there.
Was that like one of those windmills that you just blow on and it goes around?
Yeah. Yes.
Like, are you sure it was the battery or was it the wind?
It could have been both, yeah.
Anyway.
It was renewable energy either way.
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
yes.
Either way. The TV show that was the most popular, Davy Crockett, made its debut in that time.
Yes, and I think its theme song, The Ballad of Davy Crockett, was a #1 hit the following year.
God.
So it was a big Davy Crockett era. It was also a big Marilyn Monroe era because the photo of Marilyn Monroe, you know, the one, the 7-year-itch one, that was taken on set in 1954.
Yep. And another movie, Godzilla. Ishiri Honda premiered in the Japanese cinema film Godzilla.
Yes. The #1 book of the year was called Not as a Stranger by Morton Thompson, and it's the apparently very interesting story of a young doctor who sacrifices everything for his career. Have you read that one?
Some of these books just don't go anywhere beyond the year they were popular in.
Definitely not, no.
And there's books that are released in modern times that we hope don't go no further as well.
Yes, very true.
We had the transistor radio also making its debut in 1954.
And we also go into the Onion's Guide to Our Dumb Century and see what they had on their front page.
The comedy version of what might
history.
have happened in 1954.
So from their front page dated September 18th, 1954, headline, Nation's juvenile delinquency problem worsens as authorities discover... gum in our schools. And then they've got some sub-headlines. Children as young as 10 carrying sticks to class. Officials call for tougher gum control laws.
Oh, that's very funny.
Yes. And of course, 1954 also saw the release of Dial M for Murder.
Yes, and we are going to recap Dial M for Murder now. And so, obviously, you've got a couple of minutes while Dan gives you a little reminder about our HitchPod podcast to go away and watch it.
Yeah, so if you prefer to listen to our HitchPod episodes on YouTube, if that's what you've always been clamoring for and we've never provided it in that format before, you are in luck because as of a couple of months ago, we were left with no choice but to put them on YouTube because Google shut down the Google podcast service. So
there's plenty of other places you can listen to podcasts.
Thousands of other places. But if you do like to listen to all your stuff via YouTube, you could search for us there. Just go to youtube.hitchpodonline.com. You know, slam that like button, whatever they say, and follow us there. And
there won't be any thumbs up there because we do have no video there at all.
There's no video.
No video.
It's just the audio.
It's just audio
with a cover of the image of the movie.
Just like a boomer would do YouTube.
Exactly. Yes, so here comes the recap.
Right, so we are going into the recap. So we are instantly introduced to Tony. He's a former tennis player, played by Ray Milland. Margot, his wealthy wife, who's played by Grace Kelly. And Mark, her boyfriend.
Yep.
Classic love triangle. And he is played by Robert Cummings. And these three are pretty much the stars and almost the only stars of the movie.
75% of the stars, I would say.
Tony knows about the affair. The husband knows about the affair, and despite playing dumb, he does have a plan to murder Margot, his wife, so that he can inherit her fortune. And so to do this, he blackmails an old university acquaintance, Swan, who's now some kind of idiot con man.
He's not particularly bright.
No. Tony gives us a lengthy perhaps a little too lengthy
Perhaps a little
backstory
too- yes.
of how he discovered the affair. He stole a letter. He tried to blackmail Margot, pretending he was someone else. He tricks Swan into picking up the letter, so he has his fingerprints on it,
Yes.
which is really quite crafty. And then he also blackmails Swan into committing the murder.
Yes, it's not a complete blackmail though, because he also says, "I'll give you £1,000 as well." So it's a little bit of
That's
sweetener
right.
there.
He kind of just employs him.
Yeah, it's
I
carrot
suppose.
and the stick. I think he says at one point.
Yeah. He lays out his foolproof plan to Swan, who agrees to do it because otherwise he would be framed for a bunch of other crimes that
Yep.
somehow Tony knows about,
Yes.
as if he's some kind of amazing private detective criminal. Anyway, the next night, Mark and Tony head out to a bar, as you do with your wife's
lover.
boyfriend. Yeah. Margot stays at home, and there's a bit of manipulation to keep her at home, but she stays at home. And according to the plan, Swan sneaks into the house using a key that Tony hid for him. And Swan's just about to murder her when Tony makes a phone call in order to entice her to the phone. He dials M for murder.
Yes.
And she picks up the phone. Swan is preparing to murder her when she grabs some scissors and stabs him in the back. In the meantime, there's been some stopwatch confusion, but, eventually everything goes to plan. A few little hitches that add to the suspense quite nicely. She grabs the scissors. He kind of kills himself because he falls on his
Yes.
scissors,
Yes.
so to speak, falls on his sword. So now Tony has to adjust the plan on the fly. He's talked to Margot on the phone and he's coming home in the taxi with the plan swirling in his head.
Yep.
He does this pretty successfully.
He's very quick-witted.
Very quick-witted. He frames Margot as the murderer of the man who was blackmailing her. So it's almost as if he's had, months to write this screenplay.
Yes.
Anyway, good work from Tony. We're kind of wanting him to get away with it and kind of not. Anyway, not so fast. Here comes some kind of not so bumbling police officer, Inspector Hubbard, played by John Williams. He has a few questions to ask about keys. He seems to be sorting something out about keys, although the watcher doesn't, the viewer doesn't really know what's going to happen.
We don't quite know what's going on, but he's very concerned about how the murderer actually got into that place in the first place.
That's right. And he wants to know how Swan got in the front door. Tony again scrambles pretty successfully again. He pivots nicely, just like a master tennis player.
Yes.
And Margot successfully framed, arrested, tried and sentenced to death before we even know it.
Yeah, that's a very rapid transition.
It's a lovely montage. So that happens. He just before she's due to be executed, finally the boyfriend comes in and tries to save her. Mark confronts Tony with effectively the plan he committed. He has that plan to get Margot off by saying it's a bit far-fetched, but surely you could confess to this, Tony. All Tony has to do is to confess to this exact scheme that he originally came up with, and Mark has somehow guessed it. Tony says no, it's ridiculous. But here comes Hubbard, and Hubbard, who hasn't been in the picture for a while, is now being suspicious about how Tony's been spending a whole bunch of cash. Mark hides in the bedroom for some reason, and then he bursts out of the bedroom to accuse Tony with a briefcase full of cash.
Yep.
Once again, Tony is amazingly able to talk himself out of trouble. He heads down to the police station to get Margot's belongings. The day before
she's about to be executed, just like pick up her belongings.
Yeah.
He might be busy the next day. Who
Could be a
knows?
bit grim to turn up on the actual day.
Yeah, maybe.
Anyway, Hubbard has some more evidence based around keys. He summons Margot to the house. Her key doesn't work. So why is the key in her bag not working? Hubbard knows. There's been a whole heap of key swapping and shenanigans throughout. And the upshot of that all is if Tony is able to unlock the door, he's guilty. And
Yes.
sure enough, he does unlock the door. He comes into this wonderful scene of everyone in the living room
Yes.
staring at him, and Margot's exonerated. Tony's arrested. Hubbard combs his moustache in satisfaction of another mystery solved, and presumably then the boyfriend and the wife end up together. Happy ending.
A good deal of our food's been ruined. 3 out of the 4 water breakers have been smashed. A lot of water leaked out of the 4th one before it was taped. What worries me is the compass. Knocked to pieces. That's a bit awkward.
Caught in a shipwreck? Lost in the Atlantic? Say ahoy to German in a Box, your saviour for all stranded at sea situations. German in a Box will provide you with the practical, efficient solutions needed to get you to safety.
Captain?
Yeah?
German in a box may attempt to instead steer you towards an enemy U-boat. So here's where I would ordinarily do 3 jokes in a limerick, but what I've done this time around, I was trying to think of jokes for this particular movie, and I did come up with one that I expanded out into an entire sketch. So I did something similar to this for Shadow of a Doubt. So this is a similar idea. So you can find that over at my newsletter. You can go to newsletter.hitchpodonline.com and that will redirect you there. And it's a complete scene of, I think I called it Dial D for deleted scene. So it's a deleted scene from the movie. It's probably funnier than any joke I would have come up with.
It's very funny. It's very fun and worthwhile, and you should all go and look it up. And it's sort of, this is probably what should have happened to Tony when he was trying to talk his way out of his various plots and so on. But it's a very funny little skit, and you should definitely go and check it out.
Yes, so that's newsletter.hitchpodonline.com. So go read that, and I'll give the jokes a miss for this time around.
Yeah, but big thumbs up on that particular article from me.
So what else did you notice on the reviewing of this one?
Well, we did say there's a lot of plot telling and not so much showing. But again, I was just overwhelmed by how cleverly you're not quite sure who you should be rooting for, because they're all shades of black and white.
Yes.
There's Margot, but she's having an affair with someone, and there's also Mark, who's, well, is he innocent? No, he's having an affair with a married woman. And then there's Tony, poor wronged husband, who's also plotting murder. Everyone are villains.
Yes, it's really good. And I was extremely tickled this time around about just how brazen Margot was.
Yeah.
She's just like, Tony says, we should go out and have a picnic tomorrow. He says, yeah, I'll invite Mark along. It's like, okay. It's just, no. Maybe it's hiding the boyfriend in plain sight, but it was very funny once I realised that.
Yeah.
And I was basically just tickled throughout the entire movie. I had a big grin on my face throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's just one of my favourite styles of movie, this kind of very plot-heavy mystery.
Yeah.
We did mention in the first time we covered this, it's very Columbo-esque, which is one of my favourite TV shows. Still gave off all those excellent vibes. I love every minute of this movie.
And Hitchcock just loves this How Catchem style of reveal where you know exactly the audience is in on it, and so that means that we know more than the participants.
Yeah, and it's very easy, and he does it so well because it could be very easy to not explain all this key stuff. Like even trying to explain it in podcast form, it's convoluted, it's really detailed, who's got the keys when. Yes. But when you're watching the movie, it's not that complicated. It's very, he steps through it on every stage, and it's quite clear what's going on. So I think that's really well done to take a quite convoluted piece of logic that undoes the villain and have it all just, fall into place quite easily.
Yes, and partly that works so well because we did have that very telling heavy scene at the start that sets it up, which means that there's a lot more showing as the movie goes on.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you can get through that first little patch where you go, come on, spit it out, Tony, we've had enough of your story now.
Yeah. It is very exposition heavy, and that's probably the only negative in the movie. But as you say, if you get through that, then you're fine, because everything after that is just delightful.
So what we usually do here is we go through an overrated scene, an underrated scene, and so on. So let's think about our most famous scene here. What do you reckon that one is, Dan?
I mean, it's probably the strangulation scene.
Yeah,
I think if you Google Dial M for Murder, the swan looming behind with the stocking ready to strangle poor old Grace Kelly, that's the image that comes up. So is that scene overrated?
I reckon yes.
I think it is a little bit.
Because he does this terrible kind of jerky death scene, which is almost like a cliche. It's almost like a comedy scene.
Yeah, the death is
it's
a
been
little
sent
bit
up.
goofy.
Yeah, that's right. He staggers left, he staggers right. He tries to grab the thing in his back. He puts his hands to his heart. Like it's almost not. It's not quite as bad as he collapses and then he gets up again. But that's the kind of thing.
Yeah, it is a little bit silly. So I would say that one is slightly overrated for the most famous scene in the movie. But what about an underrated scene?
Well, I think we talked about there's quite a few underrated scenes here, but when Mark shows up and tries to work with Hubbard to incriminate Tony, and Tony talks his way out of it with Mark and sort of has it all over Mark, that is very funny and it's very underrated, I think.
It's incredibly funny, and I just love how cool Tony is. Like, it's completely unrealistic. I can't imagine any murderer being that ice cool when he's tiptoeing this close to being discovered, but it is very entertaining to watch him just talk his way out of everything. Mark's pointing out the stocking and Tony just responds, "Oh yes, the stocking. Perhaps I'd better tell this, Mark. It might sound more like a confession."
It's ice cold. Is this true that, all tennis players are psychopaths? Is there a trope?
So. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
It is very funny. I mean, Mark has got the right idea. He's kind of put it all together.
Yep.
The only way it could possibly have worked. Tony's just too chilled for him to really get even a sniff of this could be real.
Yeah, Mark's kind of just about putting it together with the keys. Like Tony's saying, how would the key, like how does he get in? And Mark's out there and he's going, well, he could hide the key up here or down there or over there. And he's almost got it.
Yeah.
And Hubbard just joins in with Tony. Hubbard's like, well, the flaw in that is this and the flaw in this is that. And Mark's just, I can't quite work out a way around it. It's just so much fun. And it ends with Tony kind of flipping the mystery of where the satchel of money came from, which was the evidence against him. He's basically saying, no, this is Margot got this money from the blackmailer. She was going to give it to him and then she changed her mind and murdered him. So he throws Margot under the bus yet again, gets away with it. He's got the money. It's
such
fantastic.
a great sort of bait and switch with the viewer suddenly going, oh, he's finally going to be caught, but no, he's not caught at all. And there's quite a few moments like that where you think he's going to get caught because someone's discovered the plot. No, they haven't. So, and it's a little bit of a spin on the most obvious solution is probably true.
Yes.
If someone's killed someone or trying to frame it, it's probably the partner.
Yes.
It's probably the intimate partner who's doing it. And then,
it's very good,
incredible.
very underrated scene.
Yeah.
So over on Patreon, we have we did our What Would Hitchcock Do season. We've completed that, and now we've gone back to watching some movies from the Hitchcock era that have Hitchcock-esque qualities. So we've recently watched both The Manchurian Candidate and The Thomas Crown Affair, and we had some strong thoughts on both of those, which you can listen to just a couple of bucks a month. And not just those two movies, of course, dozens and dozens of others that you can listen to, including our original episodes on every single Hitchcock movie from season 1. So that's just a couple of bucks a month. Don't wait around for that. That's patreon.com/HitchPod. And if you are a patron, you're more than welcome to suggest a movie for us to watch and talk about. We're open to suggestions. So
we would love to watch whatever our patrons want us to watch.
Yeah, so our next movie that we are covering on the Patreon feed is in fact one recommended by Freddie, who's one of our patrons, one of our regular commenters and question askers on this episode. So yes, so please sign up, a couple of bucks a month.
And if you like other movies, then Dan does a lot of stuff on his newsletter about all sorts of other movies, including more modern movies and some that have nothing to do with Hitchcock.
Yes.
So that's another reason to sign up to Dan's newsletter as well. So as far as our listeners go, you interacted with some of them on social media, Dan. I'm not sure what they said, but what did they, what was the different rankings of the highest and the lowest, and what were the Twitter poll results and so on?
Okay, so when we originally did the poll to find our top 20, the highest ranking that anybody voted for this particular one was second. Nobody ranked it first, but there were a few seconds. The lowest ranking it got was 20th.
So it was always in the top 20. Interesting.
Well, there were 9% who didn't have it in their list at all, but of the other 91%, it was in the top 20. And 63% of people had it in their top 10. And we did, in the original list creation, weight the patrons higher. If you take that weighting out, this movie would have been number 8, but the patrons pushed it up to number 7. So basically it swapped with Notorious, which went the other way. Notorious would have been number 7, it went to number 8. So patrons slightly prefer Dial M for Murder to Notorious. But we did do some more recent Twitter polls to gauge some opinions on the movie. And as always, our first question is, who is your favourite male character? So the options were Tony, Mark, Inspector Hubbard.
I don't think anyone's picked Mark.
No, Mark didn't get many votes.
I would have gone for Hubbard, but Tony's excellent. Surely it has to be Tony.
No, it is Hubbard. Hubbard gets 67% of the vote. So congratulations to Hubbard.
Tony needs a lot more credit for being so similar to Cary Grant.
Yes.
And doing such a great Cary Grant impersonation.
That's really good, isn't it?
It's the best one, I think, of all of the Hitchcock movies. It's the closest.
It's better than some of the Cary Grant impressions.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Then, of course, we asked, who is your favourite female character? Had several options here. Was it Margot, open bracket, Grace Kelly? Was it Grace Kelly as Margot? Was it Mrs. Wendis, open bracket, GK, close bracket? Or all of the above?
Yep.
Most of the votes went to all of the above.
Yeah, quite right.
Next question was, do you know where all your stockings are? And that was pretty much evenly split between yes and no. 44% for both of them, and the remaining Painter said, I know where some of my stockings are.
I think in our house we don't know because the dogs steal.
The
dogs are very famous in our house for stealing socks and stockings, for that matter.
And the last question I had was, what's your favourite hiding place for a key to your front door? I had under a step, under a doormat, under a pot plant, or get out of here, you nosy burglar.
Yes, and what's your address and what's your PIN number?
Yes. So 60% of people voted for get out of here, you nosy burglar.
Oh, that's the correct answer.
Yes. But we did also ask people for the favourite scene, and we got a response from Emily. Emily had a number of favourite scenes. She said she liked Margot's trial.
Yeah.
So she,
the fact that it was so short, perhaps?
Yeah, probably, yeah. So maybe not into lengthy courtroom dramas.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's just get to the point. She enjoyed the Tony trapping Swan, so, the very clever, I've just dropped this envelope. Would you mind picking that up? Yes, of course I will.
And the fact that he coolly explains things as he walks around, wiping all the fingerprints off everything as well, is just delightful too.
Yep. Emily also liked the attack, so the actual what we decided was a perhaps slightly overrated scene, but just still the most famous scene of the movie. And she also said, and this is a really good response, she said, a specific moment I don't see people mentioning a lot. When Tony burns the scarf, I like the way the flames flicker on his face like he's damning his soul to hell, especially the cut to Margot in white, an innocent victim.
Oh, yeah, that's
she's
great.
Not that innocent, but she's innocent-ish.
Yes.
Relatively innocent.
Yeah, look, she wasn't actually having sex with her boyfriend that night,
no.
So that she was entitled to her white, I think.
Exactly, and in the greater scheme of things, murder is worse than adultery.
Yep.
Yeah, so
you need more Hail Marys, I'm sure, for one rather than the other.
I'm almost certain that's the case. We'll check if I Confess comes up. We'll check with that.
We'll check that. Yeah.
So thank you, Emily, for those responses. That's great.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, we do. We have another question from our good friend and patron Norman Bates.
Oh yes.
He asks us the following question: how and where could you put more women into the movie?
Yes. Well, as the Twitter poll suggested, this is a movie very much lacking in women.
Yeah, and look, it just didn't change much from the screenplay, which had the one woman, one token woman in it.
I mean, if you're going to have a woman, have Grace Kelly.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, exactly.
But yes, ideally you'd have more women in there. I mean, the obvious answer is you have a woman detective.
Yeah, of course.
That's
that would be great, but maybe not in 1954.
No, perhaps not.
You had women barristers back then, according to Hitchcock. I mean, in the ideal world, you would have the comic relief housekeeper. That's pretty common.
Rope style.
Yeah, you could also have. I think it would be better if the uni friend was female.
Ah, yeah.
I think
so
the female uni friend that gets killed, because I think that would be good. And the other way, so that would be another way of putting women into the movie. But also, if Tony had a girlfriend as well, I want to.
So he's a hypocrite as well as a
hypocrite
murderer.
as well. So he has a girlfriend who also got invited daily for drinks. I think that would be good. Or maybe there's a neighbour he's having an affair with. And I mean, that would complicate the plot, but it's fine. There were a lot of extraneous characters in Rope, for example.
Yes.
We could have had a few more. We did have the guy on the buck going out for his bucks night. We could have had more characters and more scenes.
Well, there's no reason that had to be a bucks night. That could have just been a party that I guess then then the question is, why isn't Margot going? But
yeah, and I do like the way that Hitchcock keeps it kind of spare, so we don't have to see all those extraneous scenes. They are irrelevant to the plot.
Yeah.
So you would have to build it into the plot. But I think that there's some ways of adding some more women into the story.
So the whole point, this is kind of unrelated, is the reason for his watch being stopped, the plot reason, like the mechanics of the plot reason, is that explains why Swan had time to go back out and put the key away. Like what? Because he was just about to leave, and then he went in there, he waited around, no phone call. He was starting to leave, and then the phone rang, and he ran around and hid behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So are we supposed to believe that in between, when he first came in, that's when he hid the key? I don't understand the point of why have this dilemma of the
I don't think there was
stop the watch.
time to hide the key at that point.
Yeah.
I think he actually opened the door and put the key away.
Yeah, that's certainly what Hubbard suggested at the end. But
So maybe that. Well, I just thought that the delay in it was just another way of adding more suspense.
I guess
into the plot, where we think this plot isn't going to work out after all, and then it is going as smoothly as he intended.
And then it doesn't work out because she fights back.
And there's another way it doesn't work out, and so I think it's just another way of introducing just another little wrinkle into the plot.
I would have been more satisfied if there was some plot purpose to it rather than just a random piece of sense.
Or if it meant that she was standing in a different place. But in the end, the plot went off exactly as it was supposed to.
Yeah.
He did, in fact, attempt to strangle her as he was supposed to.
Yeah.
It didn't really impact him too much at all.
Yeah. Anyway. So originally you had this one ranked 12th. Where do you have it ranked now? Where would you bump it up? Would it stay more or less the same?
It's staying in more or less the same order. So at the moment, I think originally I had it under Young and Innocent. And I did debate whether I should put, and so it'd be To Catch a Thief, Young and Innocent, Dial for Murder, then Rope.
Yep.
So I wondered, okay, well, it's still above Rope for me. Is it above Young and Innocent? And it comes close because I think it's a fabulous movie. But in the end, I left Young and Innocent up a bit higher because I think the portrayal of women in Young and Innocent is more interesting.
Right.
And there's more women in it. And I just think that's one of the just one reason why I'm bumping it down.
Okay. So in your re-ranking of the movies you've watched so
Same
far?
order. Yeah. I haven't bumped it up.
So it would now be 6th out of those?
Yeah, but which I think is in the same order
as
what I had it before. Under Young and Innocent and above Rope.
Above Rope, yes. I'm rewatching this. I was so delighted with this. I think I'm bumping this up. I originally had a 5th, which I thought was very high.
Yeah.
I think this is a top 3 Hitchcock for me now.
Oh, wow. It's above To Catch a Thief?
I think it's above To Catch a Thief, and I think it's above Rope. Rope has dropped down from my number 1 spot. I think I prefer Dial M for Murder on rewatch than Rope.
Huh.
Just because I do still love Rope, but
Yep.
just the delight of the plotting mechanics of this, it just tickled me no end. I very much enjoyed this.
Fantastic. So that's a big change for you, really.
Yeah. So I think there'll be a couple of other movies that will eventually knock Dial M for Murder, but currently it is my number 1 on this rewatch.
We've got some pretty big movies coming
we
up.
have some big guns still coming. Yeah.
But Rope was your number 1 movie in the first time around.
It was the first time around, yeah. But it's now down to number 2.
Yeah.
All right. So this is where we do a deep dive into a scene when we're about to play some audio of that scene right now.
Tomorrow evening, Halliday, that's the American boyfriend, and I will go out to a stag party. She'll stay here. She'll go to bed early and listen to Saturday Night Theatre on the radio. She always does when I'm out. At exactly 3 minutes to 11, you'll enter the house with the street door. You'll find the key to this door under the stair carpet here.
The 5th step.
That's the one. Go straight to the window. Hide behind the curtains. At exactly 11 o'clock, I shall go to the telephone in the hotel to call my boss. I shall dial the wrong number. This number. That's all I shall do. When the phone rings, you'll see the light go on under her bedroom door. When she opens it, the light will stream across the room. So don't move until she answers the phone. There must be as little noise as possible.
So there we go. That's Tony, of course, laying out the plan for Swan. Very, very, very detailed plan. And that's kind of the culmination of like lots and lots of exposition.
Yeah.
So yes.
And that was shot by Hitchcock from above.
Yeah, this kind of very strange angle, wasn't it? Because
Yeah.
it's very, very interesting. Yeah, so I think the reason I thought this scene might be interesting for the deep dive is not just the strange camera angle, which is very interesting. I like the way, I mean, we've already seen how cunning Tony is, how meticulous a planner he is.
Yeah.
He's already manipulated Swan, got the fingerprints, effortlessly framed him, and, you know, we see him walk through the plan in this great depth. And what I like is the question is, how much depth is he walking through this plan in? Well, the movie was originally shot in 3D, and this scene exploits the 3D. That's the reason for the high camera angle. It literally adds depth to the plan. Like it makes it, it gives the planned crime even greater depth than it would otherwise have. So I'm not sure that's how Hitchcock intended it to be.
I don't think he thought about the pun when he was doing it. But I also like the fact that talking through this plot in real time actually takes longer than it takes in real time in a lot of ways. So it's the fact that he has to talk through how and why and where and everything else it's quicker than when Swan actually comes into the room.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So which is fabulous as well.
Yeah. And the other thing I love, and this is something you do only really pick up on a rewatch, is despite this incredibly detailed plan where he's got everything, like the light will shine through here, that's your clue to do this at precisely 11 p.m. All this detailed planning goes out the window. First of all, he doesn't make the call at 11 p.m. because of the stopwatch. And then it's ultimately all undone because Margot fights back. And again, the 3D shooting of the film is done for the moment where she fights back, which is obviously to intensify kind of the tension and excitement of the moment, but also it gives her more depth as well. She's not just a cog in Tony's plan. She's not just a pawn. She's an actual 3D character.
That's right.
Who is going to fight.
Who almost puts her hand, or the hand where she's getting strangled, almost reaches out through to the audience so they can touch her almost as she's being strangled as well. Yeah. To try and she's sort of reaching out for help to the audience, which is really terrific as well. Although that's not in this scene. So I mean, in this scene, I also like the fact that you see him doing things like dropping the letter and wiping fingerprints off various bits of the room before we know why.
Yes, yeah.
And he has to wipe the fingerprints off so that there's only a certain number of things that this guy has touched. It wouldn't make sense for him to have necessarily his fingerprints on the drawer or the wrong door handle, for example. If he's supposed to have come in through the window, then you don't want his fingerprints on the door handle. So there's a number of areas where you see what's happening before we understand how he's going to explain it in the plot, which is also clever.
Yeah. And then I guess the final thing that I love about this particular scene is that Tony, because this meticulous plan goes awry, Tony has to spend the rest of the movie improvising on this detailed plan to try to get himself off the hook and to get Margot onto the hook.
Yeah.
And he almost succeeds. That's
right. He probably could have just winged it.
Winged the whole thing. But ultimately he's undone because this detailed plan that he outlined to Swan was followed too meticulously by Swan. Swan put the key back under the stair carpeting before he was murdered, and that is ultimately the undoing of Tony. So Swan paid attention to the detail in this plan, and ultimately that extent of the detail was what undid Tony. So this is so satisfying on a rewatch.
Yeah, it's really good.
Are you tired of the same old picnic fare? Ready to add some sizzle to your outdoor dining experience? Look no further than chicken innuendo. Legs, breasts and thighs, too sensational to ignore. It starts with a bucket of chicken innuendo. It ends with lips, fingers, and all other extremities being licked. Catch a thief, catch a lover with chicken innuendo.
So we know Hitchcock loved to redo his ideas from his own movies. So the 39 Steps turns into North by Northwest, which we haven't yet seen in the countdown. It may appear soon. So let's assume Hitchcock had a further many decades to think about this movie and he wanted to redo it. What would he change from the first time around, and what would he do differently?
So, the first thing we always do here, as suggested by the previously mentioned Freddie from Patreon, we asked ChatGPT for some alternative titles, and it came up with some alternative options for Dial M for Murder. You don't want to change Dial M for Murder. That, I think, is
it's the best title ever.
It's the perfect Hitchcock title. It's the best Hitchcock title.
There is no way ChatGPT is going to come up with anything other than silly, stupid things, right?
Anyway, I'll give you 4 options that came up with. Dial M for Matrimonial Mayhem.
Oh, God. That's so bad.
Yep. The Lethal Landline.
Okay, that's pretty bad.
Grace Under Deadly Pressure.
Oh, no, that's so bad. Does ChatGPT, how does it not know that you don't put the title of the actress in a movie title? Surely that should be programmed into ChatGPT.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. And the final one it had was Call Waiting to Exhale.
No, that's so bad.
So nothing could beat Dial M for Murder. That's the best title of them all.
Yeah.
But what would Hitchcock change in this movie if he's not going to change the title? How would he keep the title and change something else to bring it up
I've
to
just
date?
thought of another title. Dial S for Scissors.
Dial S for Scissors, yes. Everyone's dialing S.
Yep.
Yes.
Anyway, so apart from the titles, I guess he would have to come up with some kind of arrangement for the keys.
Yes.
He may change that because the keys, of course, are quite small and it was a little bit too much detail. Perhaps there would be a better way of fixing that problem and coming up with a different plot device there.
Yeah, that's really tricky though. I mean, we have just replaced our front door lock with a smart lock, so we have no keys anymore, and it's very difficult to swap out fingerprints. But you can tap in entry codes, but still, I think that either makes it too hard or too easy for Tony to let Swan into the building.
That's right. There'll be records in the app.
Yeah.
So I don't think
none of that works. So you've got to have something else for now. Like, so I'm not quite sure what you
I think if there were more characters in this, there would be a way of having different people entering at different times, and whether the housekeeper came in at a certain time or not. And maybe Tony comes up with a clever way of juggling those people, particularly if it's his girlfriend from next door coming in, for example. Maybe there is some of that as well.
Yeah, that would work. The only other thing that occurred to me was the fact that, I mean, nobody really has landlines anymore, do they? Like, there's not many about. And if they do, they don't really use it. Do people get phone calls on landlines?
Phone calls, no.
So I think if there's no landline, maybe Tony gets a new Alexa or a smart speaker of some kind and programs it to play music or something at 11 p.m.
Well,
that would get her out of bed.
Our bloody thing plays music at random at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone else's does.
Yeah, so if she got up to investigate that and couldn't work out how to turn it off, so he's done something tricky with it, then maybe she does call him at the club to say, how the hell do I turn it off? And then, then you've got a title for a movie. Then it's Alexa, where's my alibi?
Yes,
that's the title
better.
of your movie.
Yes, definitely.
But but there has been a remake of this movie within,
Is
post
this the Michael
Hitchcock.
Douglas? This is the Michael Douglas one,
this
right?
is the Michael Douglas Gwyneth Paltrow version.
Yep.
So apparently there was key swapping in that movie, but there was also mobile phones and tape conversations.
Okay.
So they've updated it somehow. Haven't watched it, but if you're curious as to how someone might update it, perhaps go check out
Michael
Perfect
Douglas
Murder.
and Gwyneth Paltrow feel like exactly the right people that
the
Hitchcock
right
would have
age
in
difference as well.
late 1990s that Hitchcock would have used if he was around to make that movie.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
They both would have fit perfectly.
But speaking of that, what about in modern day, in 2024?
Yes.
Which actors would Hitchcock cast in these parts? Now, we know, of course, there is a mandatory,
Yes,
a mandatory
Florence Pugh.
female. Yeah. So therefore, Florence Pugh has to be in it.
But why not gender flip the whole movie?
Yeah.
Why not
Okay,
make Florence Pugh Tony with an eye?
Yes.
And see how we go from there. See if we
So
can gender
Florence
flip.
Pugh trying to kill the husband,
Yeah.
who's having an affair with someone else.
Yeah.
And so who's getting that male Margot role?
Well, I think the Margot male role has got to be called Mark. I'm not quite sure in retrospect why Margot and Mark are the name of the two lovers. That's terrible writing to have two such similar names.
That's right. And you are not allowed to do that if you're writing
No.
a script or a book, to have two names that are so similar that they get confused all the time.
Yes. Anyway, so let's just flip those names around. So Margot is now called Mark. Mark is now called Margot. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
So I think Timothy Chalamet is a good floppy-haired candidate for the wealthy young, gadabout husband of Florence Pugh. So,
And what about the slightly dumb girlfriend?
well, I think Sydney Sweeney. She's pretty.
Who's that?
She's just some young, attractive woman who's made a few movies recently.
All right, so
and
popular-
otherwise doesn't seem to have much going for her, but I'm sure she's lovely.
She's never the lead, right? That's the key.
I think that's true. Yeah.
Yep.
So she could be the new Mark, now called
Yep.
Margot, to keep things as confusing as possible.
Yep.
So what about the new detective?
Who's also a woman, right?
It has to be a woman. Yeah, if we've flipped it.
Yep. So that would be the Angela Lansbury character.
Yes.
Although, what is the new equivalent? Because isn't she dead?
Yeah, I know. It's a shame. Angela Lansbury would have been perfect
Right.
in this role. Dial M for Murder, She Wrote would be the new version.
Yep.
So who else could we have as the detective? What about Michelle Yeoh?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, good.
There you go. So that's our recasting gender flip version.
And what about a sequel? So we're going to move on to a few years later. What's happening here for our sequel to this wonderful movie?
I think you alluded to this earlier. I think a few years later, maybe Mark's getting sick of Margot, or vice versa, and they both kind of realise that Tony's scheme was actually a pretty good one.
Yeah.
So they try to recreate it a little bit more carefully, perhaps.
Yeah. Dial C for copycat.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. I actually asked ChatGPT. It said dial MM for multiple murders.
Oh, that's actually not bad.
Yes.
Dial M for murder, dial MM for multiple murders.
Yeah,
That's
so I
good.
think they're both trying to do it, and they somehow end up scheduling it for the same night, and
Yeah.
then you've got the two potential murderers end up killing one another,
Yeah,
and
great.
hijinks ensue, or they're arrested and they blame one another. But now both Mark and Margot know that the other's trying to kill them. So I think you can.
It
have
either
some
works
suspense.
or it doesn't,
Yeah.
and someone has to cover up the various.
But they both know they're onto one another, which
Yeah.
I think is fun.
Yeah, I think
What
that's
about-
good.
Yeah. What about a prequel?
So we need the prequel to be around the character of Swan, I think, because we allude to his backstory. We see photos of him at uni.
Yeah.
We need to know, what was he studying?
Yes.
Did he drop out? Did he cheat in his exams?
Yeah.
What was going on there, and what led him down the shady path?
I think you could make this one a bit of a farce.
Right.
I think he could be a comical buffoon who keeps
Yep.
trying to cut corners in life. And every time he tells a lie or tries to take a shortcut, it leads him into more and more trouble.
Yep.
And each time he has to come up with a bigger lie to try and get out of it, and that just leads him deeper into trouble. And on he goes until eventually, he's being invited over Tony's house where he's about to be blackmailed.
And we need to have, of course, the Alfred Hitchcock character who was in the photo with him, who was at uni with him.
Yep.
We need to have a character like that.
Portraying that, yes.
Portraying that character as well.
Yeah, I think that works. ChatGPT came up with a title for that version as well. It said Swan Dive.
Oh, yes, Swan Dive. It feels like Swan must have been the original Merry Widow murderer
Yes.
from Shadow of a Doubt.
Could well have been.
Yeah.
Yes, a very shady character. What about an 8-part TV show or just
isn't that just Columbo?
I think it is, yeah. It's just an endless series of Inspector Hubbard mysteries.
Yep.
I think give him the Columbo scripts, you're done.
Yeah,
Off you
exactly.
go. I'd watch that forever.
It feels like he has played a detective a number of times, that particular
He's very
character.
good at it,
Yeah.
yes. ChatGPT says Inspector Hubbard's Mystery Cupboard.
That's terrible. Bloody hell.
All right.
ChatGPT should be banned from this podcast at some point.
At some point it will be. So before we go on to the related movies, which movies are similar, big happy birthday to North by Northwest.
Oh.
That'll be 65 next month.
Wowee.
So according to Google, if you enjoy movies like Dial M for Murder, you will also like the following movies. So the first one I've got here is The Big Sleep from 1946. Private detective Philip Marlowe is hired by a rich family to deal with a blackmailer, Arthur Geiger. His life takes an unexpected turn as he pursues the case and Arthur is found dead. This is Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall.
Yes, unfortunately, I do like that plot idea, but anything with Humphrey Bogart just leaves me cold. So
Yep.
I won't be watching that one in a hurry. There's another one here called Niagara from 1953. While on a vacation, obviously in Niagara Falls, Rose and George, presumably on their honeymoon, befriend another couple, Polly and Ray. Subsequently, issues arise between Rose and George, which escalates into a dreadful crime. That one has Marilyn Monroe and one of our favourites, Joseph Cotton.
Yes,
that would be worth watching.
That sounds very interesting, Niagara,
Yeah.
yes.
Imagine being the other woman in that movie with Marilyn Monroe. Imagine.
Yeah. Hard to imagine.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, if you like this movie, I've said it a few times, but Columbo, honestly, 10 seasons of Columbo, 69 movie-length
Oh
episodes.
my God.
If you like Dial M for
Movie
Murder,
length? Were they all movie length?
they're all an hour and a half or so, yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yep. So go for it.
Before its time,
Yep.
movie length episodes.
Yep. And of course, if you don't like Dial M for Murder, then don't watch any of those movies.
Didn't you do a Columbo rewatch after we watched Dial M for Murder, or was it before?
I've
you were already in the middle of the
just got
rewatch.
an ongoing rewatch
Yeah.
going on, working my way through all the episodes.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, next month we will be doing a podcast that will talk about the movie that beat Dial M for Murder to the Best Picture Oscar. And that movie is On the Waterfront, and that was directed by Elia Kazan.
Yes, it's a crime drama starring Marlon Brando, which is your favourite genre.
yeah.
We've already established that.
Yep.
But we will go through all the major categories, our Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Actress, etc. And we will see if Dial M for Murder was robbed, or was it pretended to be robbed so it could be murdered? Something
That would
like
be
that.
it.
Until then, I'm Dan Libke, realising my watch has stopped.
And I'm Kat Jones. I'm speedily convicted of murder. Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPod Tweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.
And the stocking. Oh, yes, the stocking. Perhaps I'd better tell this, Mark. It might sound more like a confession.